Hello, BookTube. I've got some new releases for you today on a beautiful blue sky, very warm day. Very, very nice. Don't know how long it'll last. But this isn't a mail haul. I'm not unpacking these packages on camera. That was already done. But they are new releases or forthcoming things that I don't think we've talked about. There may be a couple of duplicates here. But I wanted to sort of put them in front of you again in case some of these things are of more interest to you than they are to me. So we'll start off with this delightful thing. This is just a delightful little hardcover from Broadleaf Books. This is Dietrich Bonhoeffer's treatment of the Psalms. A lovely, lovely new edition in a hardcover there of an immensely popular book. What have we got here? Let's see here. I've got two sheets of paper vying for my attention. What have we got here? I'm pleased to enclose a review copy of this book. This beloved classic was by revered theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer, has sold more than 100,000 copies in its lifetime. But please note the dusty style of the previous edition. And just to help us note the dusty style of the previous edition, they included it. I don't see that as being particularly dusty. It doesn't seem to me to be conceptually in any way inferior to the new one. They're both lovely in a minimalist kind of way, but you got both of them here at this with this mailing. Broadleaf Books is thrilled to be releasing this beautiful updated edition that includes a new introduction from Old Testament scholar Walter Brueggemann. It also includes excerpts from the Psalms and a biographical sketch of Bonhoeffer to help introduce the significance of his story and writings in relation to the 20th century Protestant theology. What's the matter, baby? Oh, down you go. Where are you going? Oh, you're going right next to me. Okay, all right. Let's see here. Here, let's hold up the new one. There we go. Bonhoeffer is one of the most influential theologians of the 20th century, a legacy sealed by his imprisonment in a German concentration camp and eventual execution. This edition is published to coincide with Bonhoeffer's execution on April 9th, 1945. His resistance against Nazism and pivotal role in the confessing church movement have been key points in the illumination for many on the nature of Christian political witness and action. And this is his little book on the Psalms, which I guess this new edition will include Psalms. Yes, it does. Okay, so those insets weren't there in the original. It's giving you a glimpse of what the actual text is that Bonhoeffer is referring to. Here you have the original without that. Here you have the new edition with this. And as you can tell from that copy, this is out already. So let's put I don't know where I'm going to put these things now. The bean is in my usual spot. So that's Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and that's a reprint. Next one we'll do is also a reprint. And this is coming out May the 17th, so Tuesday. This is the new Library of America volume. This one featuring Maxine Hong Kingston. So you hear the one warrior, but you also have Tripmaster Monkey, Chinaman, and wonderfully, a whole bunch of her nonfiction, including a couple of reviews that I've never read. A whole bunch of occasional prose that has been gathered for this volume. For me, that's the signature pull here. But what have we got here? Kingston made a stunning entrance on the American literary scene with The Woman Warrior in 1976. Then this book includes that. It includes Chinamen, Hawaii One Summer, and it's edited by best-selling Vietnamese-American novelist Viet Thanh Nguyen. Now gathered in this volume are Kingston's 3 classic books and additional writings, many rare, that together offer a vivid, searching portrait of immigrant experience and American dreams. And I think that one of the only pieces of occasional nonfiction that's gathered in this book that I have read is an infamous response to critics. Yes, yes. It's all the way at the back, on almost page 1,000. It's called Cultural Misreadings by American Reviewers. And when did this come out? This would have been the 80s, is that right? Goes on forever and ever. Yeah, 1982. So a good 40 years before blatant, arrogant in gratitude became ingrained in the public sphere. Now it is normal. It's acceptable that you will be that way. But this was trailblazing. The opening paragraph goes like this. When reading most of the reviews and critical analyses of The Woman Warrior, I have two reactions. I want to pat those critics on their backs, and I also giggle helplessly, shaking my head. Helpless giggles turn less frequently into sobs as one gets older. The critics did give my book the National Book Critics Circle Award, and they reviewed it in the most of the major magazines and newspapers, thus publicizing it enough to sell. Furthermore, they rarely gave it an unfavorable review. I pat them on the back for recognizing good writing. But unfortunately, I suspect most of them are perceiving its quality in an unconscious sort of way. They praise the wrong things. Thank you, Maxine. That's great. That's wonderful. Yeah. Okay. So you were right to make me world famous, but you were wrong in the way you did it, you bigoted incels. but it's high time that this, I mean, The Woman Warrior is an absolute classic. It's taught in schools all over the country. It's high time that she had a Library of America volume. So this is great. This is the new one of the new Library of America volumes. Then we have a new release that's coming out in October. So this is a long way off. And this is by Jeremiah Moss, and it's called Feral City, on finding liberation in lockdown New York. Feral City. Author, social critic, and New York City's career elegist, according to the New York Times, Jeremiah Moss, felt alienated in a town that had become suburbanized and sanitized. Then lockdown launched an unprecedented urban experience. What happens when an entire social class abandons the city? Out in the streets made vibrant by New Yorkers left behind, Moss found a sense of freedom he never thought possible. Participating in a historic explosion of protest, resistance, and spontaneity, from queer BLM marches to exuberant outdoor dance parties, he discovers that, quote, that without, quote, hyper-normal people to constrain it, New York can be more creative, connected, humane, and joyful. Because it's those ultra-wealthy white people who all fled at the first sign of COVID. None of them stayed. They don't love New York. You can't be white and love New York. In this genre-bending work of auto theory, Moss gives an account of his renewed sense of place as a transgender man, braiding the narrative with psychoanalysis, literature, and queer theory, as he offers valuable insight into the way the public space and the spaces inside us are controlled and can be set free. Naturally, a chill went down my spine at that word auto theory. It's obvious an adaptation of autofiction. Autofiction says, I'm calling this fiction even though every single thing that's happening in this book is documentable fact. And I have documented them in exact verisimilitude on my social media all along. This book that I'm calling fiction is just me being too lazy to do anything other than transcribe my social media. I'm already generating the world's greatest story. You actually want me to change things about it? You bigot? Autofiction is therefore an explicit lie and a coercion. It is sitting right out there waiting for you to say everything in this work that you're calling fiction is verifiable fact, so it is therefore not fiction. It is therefore not fiction any more than any of the other of the 21st century's strident social media fueled attempts to get you to look at something that is incontrovertible factual reality and say that it isn't, because otherwise you'll be mobbed by 12 psychos on Twitter. And auto theory just seems to take that one step further. That if autofiction is nonfiction that's lying about its status, not lying about its nomenclature, then auto theory has to be, this is the way I see things, and if you disagree with me, you're a bigot. Not just if you disagree with what kind of book I write. If you disagree with what I'm saying, with the cockamamie theories I'm coming up with about it, you're a bigot. I'm hoping that it doesn't catch on, but the portrait of New York during the height of the pandemic, I imagine we're going to get quite a few of those portraits, and I can't help but think they'll all be interesting. So I'm looking forward to this come October. Then this next one is also far away. This is September. This is Village Idiot by Steve Stern. We've got, oddly enough, two interesting cover designs here. Two cover designs in American books that I don't object to. I don't think I have a sheet for this. Oh, no, wait, I do. Okay. You can see the cover while I tell you about the book. This comes out in September. Award-winning author Steve Stern returns with a wild, effervescent, absinthe-soaked novel about the life of the remarkable expressionist painter Chaim Soutine. This book opens on a glorious spring day in 1917 Paris, when the newcomer Soutine has been drawn into a mad boat race whose participants include some of the foremost artists of the age. Though Soutine cannot be observed in the regatta, he is several leagues below the surface of the river, outfitted in a heavy diving suit, hauling along his older friend, the painter Modigliani, who has chosen to launch himself in a bathtub. It's from this underwater vantage point that Soutine sees the life he's lived and the life yet to come unfolding beyond the viewpoint of his helmet. Okay. It's a quite extraordinary life, from his impoverished beginnings in East European shtetl to his emigration to Paris, to his Cinderella patronage by the American collector Albert Barnes, and his perilous flight from the Nazi occupation of France. So, that early 20th century, this is from Melville House, that early 20th century art scene in Paris, if any of you love that scene, I know some of you do, you've got a novel coming out aimed squarely at it. I'd be willing to bet this thing gets reviewed pretty widely. Then we have a book, when is this coming out? This is also a September release. This is by Chad Hansen, and it is called In a Land of Awe, Finding Reverence in the Search for Wild Horses. It's about America's wild Mustangs. I have a sheet for this as well. Good. Let's see what we have here. This is, let's see here. On the edges of our frantic 21st century nation, bands of wild horses stand nestled together, calmly nuzzling each other to maintain the bonds of family. Prairie hills unfurl around them, and the sky provides their shelter. In the same states where factories churn, offices bustle, and cell phones demand our attention, remote places of solace and beauty rest, mostly undiscovered, in a parallel world that lies closer than we often imagine. And this, according to this is a book by professor and poet Chad Hansen about the ways that wild Mustangs give us new ways to see and meaningfully engage our world as we enter new considerations about how we understand animals and our landscape. And I generally tend to like this kind of book, this kind of reflections on nature. The only thing I don't like about it is when they descend into woo, into woo-woo, into sheep dip. And unfortunately, I dipped into this book, and it's no later than page 10 that we get this paragraph. Sometimes I wonder, who would we become as a people if sage-covered prairies with wild horses running on them were the landscapes of our memory? If we could possess them in that way, wouldn't they also come to possess us as well? If memories of wild horses and prairies were what made us, then in some way, wouldn't we become them? Over the years, the rolling grasslands of the West have come to occupy a large space in my mind, a space that I return to for replenishment and awe. Near the middle of my life story, I discovered if you wander the prairie long enough, the prairie starts to wander you. That is not true. None of those things are true. You do not become a Mustang by liking Mustangs. You don't become the American prairie by wandering the American prairie. It doesn't become you. I don't even know what that means. I've wandered the American prairie quite a bit. I am not a prairie. it's that silly fortune cookie, write a sentence one way, then invert the order of the nouns in the sentence as though to simulate a profound insight. It was mocked in the movie Mystery Men, where Wes Studi plays a masked hero who does that relentlessly. He does that forever. He's mocked for it by Ben Stiller's character in the movie. It's easy to do that. It's easy to say, the sunrise comes but once a day, but does the day come but once a sunrise? That sort of thing. It's just ridiculous, and I'm hoping there's not much of it in this book. Then we have a finished copy of the book that I think I have talked about before. No sell sheet in here, but I can just describe it to you. It's by Ben McGrath, and it's called Riverman, An American Odyssey. Nice deckled edges there, a nice finished hardcover. And it's about one particular person that some of you may already know about, but it broadens out into that. This is the story of Dick Conant. For decades, Dick Conant paddled the rivers of America, covering the Mississippi, Yellowstone, Ohio, and Hudson, as well as innumerable smaller tributaries. These solo excursions were epic feats of planning, perseverance, and physical courage. At the same time, Conant collected people wherever he went, creating a vast network of friends and acquaintances who would forever remember this brilliant and charming man even after a single meeting. And Conant he's legendary, and he disappeared. He disappeared not that long ago in the Outer Banks. Ben McGrath, a staff writer for The New Yorker, was one of those people. In 2014, he met Conant by chance just north of New York City as Conant paddled down the Hudson, headed for Florida. McGrath wrote a widely read article about their encounter, and when Conant's canoe washed up a few months later without any sign of his body, McGrath set out to find the people whose lives he had touched, to capture a remarkable life lived far outside the staid confines of modern existence. So, depending on how much, kayaking or paddling or canoeing or whatnot you've done in the last 30 years in these particular waterways, it will depend a large part of whether or not you've ever heard of this guy. But McGrath is a really good writer. So it's going to broaden out from that to a lot of other things. Okay, well, new releases don't have to be good releases, right? They don't have to be pleasant things. I, for instance, am going to read all the new releases that I can get my hands on. And I feel that I should tell you about them. This next one is infamous, of course. You've been hearing all about it if you've been watching the news. And it is the latest example in a noxious trend. Just the roll call of the damned. But we might as well go over it since we're right here. This is A Sacred Oath by Mark Esper. What is the subtitle? Memoirs of a Secretary of State During Extraordinary Times. This is Mark Esper, who was Donald Trump's Secretary of Defense. And this book is Esper's unvarnished and vivid account of his tenure in the Trump presidency. In a deft and riveting behind-the-scenes portrait of a volatile White House, Esper shares his own vital perspective during what he calls one of the most chaotic, difficult, and consequential periods in modern American history. An extraordinary period where we fought a global pandemic, the likes of which the world hadn't seen in a century, dealt with the greatest domestic unrest in 2 generations, battled aggressive actions by hostile powers and terrorist groups around the world, began transforming the U.S. military through the implementation of a new national defense strategy, and endeavored to do all of this while dealing with an idiosyncratic, unpredictable, and unprincipled commander-in-chief. Esper, who had prioritized improving and revitalizing his branch of the military as Secretary of the Army, hit the ground running when appointed Secretary of Defense in 2019. He was immediately immersed in potential conflicts with North Korea, Iran, and Syria, and increasing tensions with China and Russia, and quickly learned that the president's unpredictable responses to international issues swung like a pendulum. Despite being undermined by the rhetoric coming out of the Oval Office, Esper worked to shore up America's shaky relationships with its allies in Asia and Europe, and leveraged decades of experience to counterbalance the White House's dangerous ideas on how to deal with Venezuela, illegal immigration, drug cartels in Mexico, and Iran. Even as a global pandemic threatened to undermine America's military readiness, Esper spearheaded the Department of Defense's COVID response, which provided medical support around the country and helped launch Operation Warp Speed. This came out on May the 10th. A lot of you will already have heard about it because Esper has been doing the rounds. He has been doing the reputation rehabilitation rounds, talking about this book and how utterly appalled he was. I was utterly appalled that the President of the United States was... I was utterly appalled that the President of the United States was telling us, was wondering, can't we shoot protesters? Can't we bomb Mexico and lie about our culpability? Can't we do this, that, and the other thing? He's saying this now because he's teasing a book that he has to sell. A big fat thing that is selling for $35 a copy. But he did not say any of these things immediately prior to the election. So you can't have it both ways. And yet every single former disgraced, reprehensible Trump official is trying to have it both ways. We saw William Barr one damn thing after another. And now we see another co-conspirator, another completely guilty co-conspirator. If Esper is right about the things that he claims he saw, then he had a duty to the country that he swore an oath to protect to tell the populace about those things before they voted. And he didn't do it because he wanted to save them for a book. And we have seen that behavior time and time and time again, where in some cases, for instance, John Bolton, people refused on pain of subpoena to testify because it would hurt the sale of their eventual book. This book deserves to sell not a single copy, and yet people fall for it. Him making the rounds will certainly get this to sell. I view it as my penance to read these things. I don't anymore view it as my penance to review them all. How many times can I say the same thing? The opportunism, the naked grabbiness here is completely obvious. So, anyway, we'll finish on a happier note. This is a book about the inventiveness of a city right across the river from where I am, Cambridge, Massachusetts. Is right across the river. And this is a book by Karen Weintraub and Michael Kutcha called Born in Cambridge, 400 Years of Ideas and Innovations. A slightly oversized thing that tells you all about the amazing things that came out of Cambridge, Massachusetts. Cambridge, Massachusetts is the city of firsts, the first college in the English colonies, the first two-way long-distance phone call, the first legal same-sex marriage. In 1632, Anne Bradstreet, living in what is now Harvard Square, wrote one of the first published poems in British North America. And in 1959, Cambridge-based Carter's Ink marketed the first yellow highlighter. So you know who to blame. W.E.B. Du Bois, Julia Child, Yo-Yo Ma, and Noam Chomsky all lived or worked in Cambridge at various points in their life. Cambridge is famous for being home to MIT and Harvard, and these institutions play a leading role in many of the stories in this book. The development of microwave radar, the invention of napalm, and Robert Lowell's poetry workshop. Not sure what those three things are doing together. But the area is less often credited for its contributions outside of academia, including junior mints, which were invented in Cambridge. Mount Auburn Cemetery, the first garden cemetery, and the public radio show Car Talk, that I know a lot of you love. Cambridge's vivid history demonstrates not only a genius for invention, but also a genius for reinvention. And the authors consider larger lessons from Cambridge success stories about urbanism, the roots of innovation, and the nurturing of the next generation of good ideas. I'm glad that, napalm notwithstanding, and also Vannevar Bush, who I'm sure is going to show up in this book, I'm glad that we're at least categorizing junior mints as a good idea. That would be great. So we've got a lot of pictures there on the cover. This is just going to be a hoot to go through. Not 100% sure how reviewable it is, but it'll be a heck of a lot of fun to read. And if you live in Cambridge, or if you're interested in this sort of thing, you'll know that it's coming. You'll know that all these things are either out or coming out. So those are our new releases. Sorry for the very dramatic curtain blowing in the background. We have, let's see here, Born in Cambridge, all the amazing things that were invented in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and the people who did the inventing. We have Mark Esper's book, A Sacred Oath, which meant the sacred oath that he took meant absolutely nothing to him. Riverman by Ben McGrath, starting out as a portrait of one particular guy, but moving out from there. In a Land of Awe, Chad Hansen's book about wild Mustangs on the American prairie. Village Idiot by Steve Stern, a novel about the early 20th century Paris. Feral City by Jeremiah Moss. This is about what New York was like during the height of the pandemic when lots and lots of businesses closed. Lots and lots of people had to leave the city and go home or whatnot. We have the New Library of America volume. This is Maxine Hong Kingston, which has her famous works and also, very valuably, a collection of her nonfiction occasional pieces that haven't been collected before, as far as I know. And finally, Dietrich Bonhoeffer's little book on the Psalms, which has been a phenomenal bestseller. And we have the new edition here, just for comparison's sake. I don't think this thing is for sale, but there's also a paperback reprint of the original edition. But it has an ISBN, now that I think of it, so it probably is for sale. And there you have it. Those are some new releases for your consideration. I'm going to see what I can do about this window before I make any other videos today. But anyway, hoping that some of those intrigued you. You now know that they're coming. I'm going to wrap this up before I get blown away, but I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.